mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. At AM 630. WMAL. Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, the Fab Four. Awesome.
I think you'll understand.
You know
that
what?
Fab.
They are.
They're fab.
They're still fab, I think. You know, hey, listen, the Beatles' first American concert was 50 years ago tomorrow in Washington, D.C., and we got a big show planned on that. But you know, when
Right here, on Mornings on
this
the
show,
Mall
you
tomorrow
definitely
morning, yes.
you're not going to miss tomorrow because we got. But when we got to talking about who can we get on to talk about the Beatles, I actually have two friends who are complete Beatle nuts. One of them is my friend James Rosen at the Fox News Channel. He'll join us tomorrow. On the phone right now is the other one, Tony Perkins, the anchor of Fox 5 News. Now, Larry, be very nice to him because he's a late-night TV anchor. He's not used to getting up in the morning. Hey, Tony, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you guys?
Pleasure to have you. How you been?
I've been great. It's this is a fun time of year if you're a big Beatles fan. These are big anniversaries that we're celebrating.
They are. Now, you have a son, Connor, and I have a daughter that and when I talk about Beatles, I get a rolling of the eyes. And I keep saying, no, you don't understand how important they are. Well, you know, when you have this conversation with young Connor, who's not so young anymore,
Right.
you know, do you have to explain to him the importance of the Beatles? What do you say?
You know what? It's funny because he kind of gets it because he's grown up around it. Because I'm such a big fan and listen to the music and have the memorabilia and all that kind of thing. He's 10 now. He has already gone through his Beatles phase. He's on to Eminem and a whole bunch of other people right now. I don't let him listen to the dirty Eminem, but so he's gone through the Beatles phase. But he kind of gets it, you know. And I think a lot of the younger folks, it is hard for them today to understand the significance of the moment. When they came here, you know, it's before social media and it's before, you know, these well-orchestrated, pre-planned publicity events and all that kind of stuff. Everything that happened with the Beatles was pretty organic, and it was huge. The impact was huge, and as you guys said just a moment ago, we still feel it today.
And, Tony, you know, so much was made of the Beatles when they first arrived here about their look. I mean, the music was sort of secondary at that time. Little did we know after, you know, the 7 or 8 years where they were most active, that their music would just transcend. They were talking about their haircuts and their outfits, the garments they wore.
Well, what's funny is, you know, last night was the 50th anniversary of their appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. Tomorrow is the 50th anniversary of their first U.S. concert here in Washington. Today is the 50th anniversary of the Beatles getting up at the Plaza Hotel, getting the newspapers, reading the reviews of their appearance on Ed Sullivan, and reading mostly negative reviews. The grown-ups, the grown-ups, if you will, and the mainstream media didn't get it. And you're right, they focused on the haircuts. They said you couldn't understand what they were singing, which clearly, if you look at the footage, isn't true.
Well, it may have been those Liverpool accents, let's face it.
Maybe it was the Liverpool accent, yeah. But, you know, the mainstream media and the adults, if you were, didn't get it initially. And I think what happened that night, you know, a line was drawn kind of in the sand that really that's when you really began to see the difference, that generation gap that we talked about so much, the significant difference in how young people were viewing things and older people were viewing things. And, you know, the Monday after, boys were combing their hair forward, and you know, girls, all they talked about were the Beatles the night before.
All right, so but yeah, they got the bad reviews. They dusted themselves off, got on a train, and came to Washington, D.C. Pick up the story there.
They came to Washington. There was a snowstorm. It's funny. I was in New York this weekend. I was a co-host of a Beatles tribute and benefit concert Saturday night at Town Hall in Times Square. So yesterday, I was on the train and came back down to Washington, and I couldn't help but think, wow, you know, this is the trip the Beatles took. You get off the train, you walk through Union Station. They came down because it was snowing. They could not fly down. And they faced the same kind of media horde here that they had faced in New York City when they arrived in New York, and it was tremendous. They got to the Shoreham Hotel,
Omni Shoreham, right?
Yeah, the Omni Shoreham, and George was sick. He had the flu, so they did a photo shoot out on the Mall. There are famous photos of them. with the Capitol behind them, but it's only John, Paul, and Ringo because George was still recovering from the flu. And then, as you said, on Tuesday, the 11th, they appeared at the Washington Coliseum.
Yeah.
And it was their biggest crowd to date. They really didn't quite know what to expect, but it was, if you watch the films of the concert, 8,000 kids screaming. The Beatles had to come through the Washington Coliseum, which is putting on a tribute concert tomorrow night. I'll be there, as a matter of fact. The Washington Coliseum was a sports arena, and they put on boxing matches and all that kind of thing. So they performed in the round on the mat of a boxing ring.
It's amazing.
And it was insane.
I've seen this footage, and didn't they have to spin, like after every song they spun 25% turn, 90-degree turn?
They'd
Ringo had to get up and move his drum riser around. And
Oh, my goodness.
So that it was crazy. They had to come through the audience to get to the stage, which is something that would never happen today, of course. But it was it's one of their best shows because they are so jazzed about being in America and getting the reception that they were getting, and of course Americans are just going crazy over this. Remember, this was just 3 months after the assassination of President Kennedy.
Yeah,
and things were dark, things were heavy at that time.
Our guest is.
Sorry. This provided a release.
Thank you, Tony. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Our guest is Fox 5 anchor Tony Perkins, and tonight you've been doing pieces about this leading up to tomorrow's celebration. You've got your final piece tonight, yes?
Yeah, final pieces tonight on the 10 p.m. news. It's why the Beatles matter to me. How it is. People are often surprised because I'm a black guy. I grew up in Southeast Washington for my first 5-6 years when I was here in D.C., and they're kind of surprised that I'm such a big Beatles fan. So I talk about how they impacted my life and, even made their way into my world, my community, my culture, and all that kind of thing. And it's kind of my personal reflections.
And why are they important to you?
For me, they really, and I think for a lot of people, they opened my eyes to, things kind of went from black and white to color when the Beatles came along. And they were so fresh. You played I Want to Hold Your Hand leading into this piece.
Right.
I always tell people, if you take that song, their first big hit here in America, and play 10 songs that were on the pop charts in late 1963 or early 64, throw that one in, it is like it was beamed in from outer space.
Yeah.
It's so different from everything else. You couldn't help but notice, and you couldn't help but be fascinated by
And
it.
musically, the reverberations continue because the stuff you hear on the radio today, they stand on the shoulders of the Beatles and others. Yeah.
They absolutely do. If you look at where things were when the Beatles started and where they were in 1970 when they broke up, they literally changed the course of pop music and pop culture.
Fox 5 anchor Tony Perkins, thanks for joining us, kicking off our Beatles Remembrance and Celebration. Don't forget to watch his big report tonight at 10 p.m., finishing his whole series. And thanks for joining us this morning.
Did you see his Beatle collection?
Yeah, the memorabilia is remarkable.
It's awesome, yeah.
You mentioned that tomorrow we're dedicating our morning show to the celebration.
That's right, yeah.
And if you want a preview of that, you can go to WMAL.com because there's a whole section of our WMAL.com website dedicated to this 50th anniversary of the Beatles here in Washington, D.C.